She had always loved music. From the earliest days she could remember, the sound of piano keys had called to her in a way that nothing else did. She could spend hours just pressing one key after another, letting her fingers wander across the black and white landscape. Some days the notes would sound clumsy and awkward, but she would keep playing, refusing to stop, learning with every mistake. The piano had become her closest companion, a friend who never judged her, who always listened to her deepest thoughts and feelings without asking anything in return. It was in the quiet of her small practice room that she felt most herself, free from the pressures of the outside world. Her life had not been easy. Growing up, there were many days when money was tight and opportunities seemed out of reach. Lessons were expensive, and she often had to make do with second-hand books and old sheet music. The piano she practiced on was chipped and a little out of tune, but she loved it anyway. It had character. She learned to see beauty in imperfections, to find rhythm even in the unevenness of life. Those early struggles shaped her determination. She learned that talent alone was not enough. It needed hard work, persistence, and a willingness to keep going even when the world seemed indifferent. She spent her mornings in school, trying to keep up with lessons, and her afternoons practicing relentlessly. Friends came and went, but few understood her obsession with music. Some teased her for spending so many hours at the piano instead of playing outside or joining social activities. Sometimes their words hurt. Sometimes she wondered if it was worth it. But the moment she sat down at the piano, all doubts melted away. The keys under her fingers felt like home. The music that flowed from her fingertips carried the emotions she could not speak aloud. Every melody, every chord was a piece of her heart laid bare. Her teachers had noticed her talent early on. They often said she had a rare sensitivity to music, a way of feeling every note deeply. But talent, she learned, was not the same as recognition. Many children had talent, but few had the chance to show it to the world. For years, she performed only in small recitals, local competitions, or school events. Each performance was a mix of excitement and fear. She hated the feeling of nerves twisting her stomach, the way her hands would tremble as she prepared to play. But she also loved it. There was nothing like the moment when the music began and the audience fell silent, when the room seemed to exist only for her and the piano. Despite her quiet nature, she had a dream. She wanted to play on the biggest stages, in grand halls filled with people who could hear every note and feel every emotion. She dreamed of walking into a hall where the lights shone brightly, the seats stretched endlessly, and the audience waited with eager anticipation. She dreamed of the thrill of performing, the rush of music filling the air, and the shared moment between artist and listener. That dream kept her practicing late into the night, even when her fingers ached and her eyes burned with fatigue. Her journey had been lonely, but it had also been full of lessons. She learned to listen, not just to the music but to herself. She learned to trust her instincts, to feel the rhythm in her own heart rather than copying someone else. She learned that mistakes were not failures but steps toward growth. Every wrong note taught her something about timing, touch, and emotion. Every stumble in a performance taught her how to recover gracefully. The piano was her teacher, and she was willing to learn whatever it wanted to show her. Finally, one day, an opportunity came that felt almost too good to be true. She was invited to perform at a prestigious music hall, a place where only the most accomplished musicians usually played. The hall was renowned for its grand stage, perfect acoustics, and audiences who appreciated artistry. She could hardly believe it when she received the invitation. Her heart raced and her mind filled with both excitement and fear. This was a chance to show what she could do on a stage far beyond the small rooms and school auditoriums she had known all her life. As the day of the performance approached, her nerves grew stronger. She spent every waking hour preparing, practicing until her fingers felt numb, listening to recordings of the pieces she would play, and imagining herself on the stage. She rehearsed in her room, in the school hall, and even in empty classrooms to get used to different acoustics. She visualized the audience, the lights, and the weight of expectation that would soon rest on her shoulders. Every night she went to bed with her mind buzzing with melodies and rhythms, dreaming of the moment she would finally step onto the grand stage. Despite the fear, she felt ready. She had worked hard and she knew she could perform well, but there was a small part of her that wondered if she could truly rise to the occasion. The grand hall was a new world and the audience unknown. What if they did not like her playing? What if she made mistakes in front of so many people? She tried not to let these thoughts take over. She reminded herself that every great musician had faced doubt. Every performer had felt the pressure of a new stage. What mattered was courage, the courage to face the unknown and let the music speak. The night of the performance finally arrived. She walked into the hall and was struck by its grandeur. The ceiling soared high above, adorned with sparkling chandeliers. The walls were lined with elegant details, and the seats stretched back as far as she could see. She felt a thrill, but also a tremor of fear. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had prepared for this moment. The piano on the stage looked magnificent under the spotlight. Its polished surface reflected the lights, and its keys seemed to invite her to create magic. Backstage, she waited nervously. Performers milled around, adjusting their instruments, reviewing notes, and quietly rehearsing. She felt small among them, but she also felt a sense of belonging. They were all there for the same reason, drawn by the love of music. She took another deep breath, feeling the familiar comfort of her piano practice in her bones. She remembered all the nights she had spent alone in a quiet room, the sweat, the tears, and the joy of discovering something new in each note. All of that had led to this moment. She thought about the audience, strangers who had come to hear music, to feel emotion, to experience something beyond words. She realized that she was not just playing for herself, but for them as well. Every note she would strike carried a message, a piece of her heart. She felt the responsibility and the excitement intertwine, creating a sharp focus she had never felt before. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the first note she would play, the ripple of sound spreading through the hall, touching every listener. Her heart pounded as she heard her name announced. The applause began softly, growing louder as she walked to the piano. Every step felt heavy with anticipation. When she reached the instrument, she took a seat, her hands hovering over the keys. She felt a rush of adrenaline, a familiar mix of fear and exhilaration. She reminded herself to breathe, to let go of worry, and to trust in all the hours of practice that had brought her here. She pressed her hands gently onto the keys, feeling their smooth surface, and for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to let the music flow from her heart without hesitation. And then, she began to play. The first note sounded, clear and pure, filling the hall with its simple beauty. She felt the connection immediately, the way the sound carried her emotion into the room. The music grew, delicate and strong, moving through different tempos and moods. Her fingers moved with confidence now, translating every thought and feeling into melody. The audience listened, captivated by the depth of feeling she poured into each note. The nervousness that had gripped her moments before seemed to vanish, replaced by a powerful sense of purpose. As she continued, she felt herself becoming part of the music in a way she had never experienced before. It was no longer just about technique or hitting the right keys. It was about expression, about telling a story through sound. Every pause, every crescendo, every delicate touch had meaning. She could feel the hall respond, the quiet attention of the audience, the subtle shift in energy with each phrase. The piano became an extension of herself, and she realized that this was what she had always dreamed of, not just performing, but communicating, connecting, and moving people with her music. The young pianist had come a long way from small rooms and old, worn pianos to this magnificent hall filled with strangers waiting to hear her play. She had faced self-doubt, long hours of practice, and the challenges of life that could have easily discouraged her. But all of that had prepared her for this moment. The music that flowed from her hands was a testament to her journey, her dedication, and her love for the piano. In that moment, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Backstage, the young pianist tried to steady her racing heart. The lights of the hall filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. She could hear the faint murmurs of the audience settling into their seats, the soft rustle of programs being flipped, and the distant notes of another musician tuning. Her hands, though steady on the keys moments ago, now felt slightly shaky. It was normal, she told herself, to feel nervous before such a big performance. But tonight was different. Tonight, something in the air felt electric, charged with expectation. Then she noticed him. The renowned pianist who was seated in the front row, a man whose reputation preceded him. He was known for his genius, his charm, and his occasional playful teasing. People admired him for his extraordinary talent, but also for his confidence that could sometimes come across as intimidating. He had performed on stages far grander than this, in halls across the world, yet he had taken an interest in her performance tonight. That attention should have been flattering. It should have inspired pride. Instead, it made her stomach twist with nervous energy. As she adjusted her dress and ran her fingers lightly over the piano keys, he approached. She hadn't expected him to speak directly to her, especially not now, right before she was to perform. He leaned slightly forward, a teasing smile on his face, and said something that caught her completely off guard. It was a joke, light-hearted, about how difficult the piece she was about to play was, and how he doubted anyone could play it without turning it into a disaster. The words were not mean, but they carried an edge of challenge. The kind of challenge that left her cheeks warm and her mind racing. She froze for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Part of her wanted to laugh, to brush it off as friendly teasing. But another part of her felt the sting of doubt. Did he really think she couldn't handle it? Did he not know the countless hours she had spent practicing, perfecting each note, memorizing every phrase? She could feel the tension building inside her. Her fingers itched to start playing, to prove that she was capable, but at the same time, her confidence wavered under his amused gaze. The audience had started to settle, and the murmurs of anticipation grew louder. She reminded herself that this was her moment. The joke, while unsettling, could not control her. If anything, it ignited something within her. A small flame of defiance flickered in her chest. She decided then that she would not let a playful comment shake her focus. She would take it as a challenge, not an insult. She would show him and everyone else that she was not just capable, but extraordinary. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. She remembered the hours spent alone in her small practice room, the days when she struggled with a single passage, the nights when her fingers ached and her mind wanted to quit. She remembered the satisfaction of finally mastering a difficult phrase, the joy of creating music that felt alive and real. That memory gave her strength. She realized that her music was not for anyone else's judgment. It was for her and for the audience who would listen with open hearts. When she opened her eyes, the renowned pianist had stepped back, still watching with a curious smile. She could feel his eyes on her, but instead of allowing them to intimidate her, she let them focus her. Every heartbeat, every nerve ending, every thought centered on the piano in front of her. She could feel the smoothness of the keys beneath her fingers, the weight of the instrument ready to carry her music across the hall. This was the moment she had worked for. This was the moment to show courage, to let the music speak louder than any teasing remark. As she walked toward the piano, she noticed the way the hall seemed larger than life. The chandeliers sparkled like thousands of tiny stars. The rows of seats stretched far beyond what her eyes could see. The audience's faces were distant, shadowed, but she could feel their attention, their curiosity, their expectation. It was a weight that could have crushed someone less prepared, but she welcomed it. She welcomed the challenge, the thrill of standing in front of so many people and letting herself be vulnerable through music. She sat down on the piano bench and adjusted her posture. She placed her hands lightly on the keys, feeling the smooth surface under her fingertips. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, to slow her racing thoughts. The joke the renowned pianist had made was still in her mind, but it no longer felt like an attack. It was now a spark, a reminder that she could rise to any challenge. She pressed her hands together, then slowly released them, letting her fingers rest naturally on the keys. The hall had grown quiet. The audience's murmurs had faded, replaced by a soft, expectant silence. Every eye was on her. Every ear waited to hear what she would play. She could feel the weight of anticipation pressing against her chest, but instead of panic, she felt focus. She reminded herself that music was not about perfection. It was about feeling, about telling a story that could reach the hearts of others. She could let her nerves guide her into hesitation, or she could let her courage guide her into expression. She chose courage. The first note rang out, delicate and clear, carrying through the hall like a single breath. She felt the familiar connection, the way sound became an extension of her emotions. Each subsequent note flowed more confidently. The music began to rise and fall, gentle and strong, weaving a story that no words could capture. She imagined the audience listening not just with their ears but with their hearts. She imagined the emotion of the music reaching each person, stirring memories, hopes, and dreams. The teasing remark from earlier had transformed into fuel. She played with intention, with depth, letting every note carry meaning. Her hands moved fluidly, almost as if guided by memory and instinct rather than thought. Every chord she struck was precise yet full of emotion. She felt the story she wanted to tell taking shape, a story of determination, courage, and passion. The audience was drawn into it, silent but attentive, hanging on every movement of her hands and every sound that filled the hall. She could see the renowned pianist now, sitting in the front row. His smile had changed slightly. It was no longer teasing. Instead, it was one of genuine interest, even admiration. He leaned forward slightly, eyes focused as if trying to understand the depth of what she was creating. That small shift in his expression gave her a quiet sense of validation, not the kind that depended on approval, but the kind that reminded her that true artistry could be recognized by those who truly understood it. Her confidence grew with every measure. She no longer thought about the joke, the audience, or even the grand hall. She thought only of the music. She felt it flowing through her, guiding her fingers, shaping her posture, lifting her spirit. Each note told a part of her story, the long hours of practice, the struggles, the doubts, and the triumphs. She realized that the music was not just sound. It was a bridge between herself and every person listening. It was a conversation without words, a connection that went beyond anything she could explain. The hall seemed to respond to her playing. The air was charged with a quiet energy, a tension that was both exhilarating and humbling. She felt as though the room itself was listening, holding its breath with her, experiencing the music in real time. The more she played, the more she lost herself in it. She no longer felt small or nervous. She no longer thought of the teasing words or the renowned pianist's watchful gaze. She was completely immersed in the flow of music, letting it guide her, let it express everything she had carried inside her for so long. As she continued, she noticed subtle reactions in the audience. Some leaned forward, captivated by the delicacy of her touch. Others closed their eyes, absorbed in the emotion. She could sense the way the music traveled across the hall, reaching the farthest corners. That awareness fueled her even more. She wanted them to feel the depth of every note, the truth of every chord. She wanted them to understand that music was more than technique. It was heart, soul, and story intertwined. When she reached a particularly challenging passage, her fingers moved with precision and speed, yet every note retained clarity and expression. This was a moment where she could have faltered, where nerves might have taken over, but instead she embraced it, trusting herself, trusting the hours of practice that had led to this moment. The challenge became part of the music, adding tension, excitement, and drama to the piece. She felt alive in a way that only came from true immersion in something she loved. By the time she reached the next section, a slow and melodic part of the composition, she allowed herself to breathe again, to let the music breathe with her. The gentle notes flowed like a river, soft and warm, carrying emotion across the hall. She could feel the audience leaning into the sound, their quiet attention a testament to the power of music to hold people in a shared moment. She felt connected to them in a way that transcended words, a silent understanding passing from her heart to theirs. The young pianist's performance was no longer just about proving herself. It had become a dialogue, a shared journey with the audience. Every gesture, every note, every pause held meaning. She felt her own emotions reflected back in their faces, in their eyes, and it gave her a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. The initial fear, the nervous energy, and even the teasing remark from the renowned pianist had all led her to. The moment she pressed the first key, something shifted. It was as if the hall itself had changed, waiting to be filled with the music she carried inside her. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, the sound resonating more deeply than it ever had during practice. Every note vibrated through the room, weaving a pattern that was both delicate and strong. She felt a thrill of excitement surge through her as the music took on a life of its own, moving not just her fingers but her entire body. Her hands glided over the keys with precision and grace, each movement natural yet purposeful. She played the opening section with care, ensuring that every note was clear and expressive. The audience, initially quiet and still, began to lean forward, drawn in by the beauty of her performance. She could sense their attention, like a soft current that flowed toward her. It was a silent acknowledgement of her presence, a recognition of the effort and emotion she was pouring into each note. As the music progressed, she allowed herself to feel completely. She remembered all the hours of practice in her small room, the mistakes she had made, the moments of frustration, and the times she had almost given up. Those memories became part of the performance, coloring the music with authenticity and depth. She realized that it was not just technical skill that captivated the audience. It was honesty, the willingness to pour her soul into the piano and let it speak. The hall was enormous, yet she felt a sense of intimacy with the audience. Each person was a witness to her story, and she felt a deep responsibility to communicate every emotion she intended. She imagined each face in the crowd, the eyes watching her, the expressions shifting as the music unfolded. She played with patience and care, letting the melody rise and fall, creating tension and release that carried the listeners along with her. The music became a conversation, one that required no words but conveyed everything she felt. She moved into a faster section of the piece, her fingers flying across the keys with remarkable agility. Every chord struck with precision, every passage flowed seamlessly into the next. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, absorbed entirely by the movement of the music. This was the part she had practiced countless times, yet it never felt the same as it did in this moment. The energy of the hall, the quiet anticipation of the audience, and her own excitement combined to create a performance that was alive, breathing, and unpredictable. The renowned pianist was watching closely from the front row. His expression had changed completely from the teasing grin he had worn earlier. Now it was focused, almost intense, as if he were examining every nuance of her technique, every subtle touch and dynamic choice. She could feel his attention, but instead of making her nervous, it gave her confidence. She knew he recognized her skill, her dedication, and her ability to bring the music to life. She did not need his approval, but the acknowledgement made her feel validated in the hours of effort she had invested. Her mind entered a state of complete focus. She no longer thought about the hall, the audience, or the pianist. She thought only of the music. The notes, the rhythm, the phrasing, it all became instinctive. Her fingers seemed to know exactly where to go, and her hands moved with a fluidity that surprised even her. She had reached a point where practice, experience, and emotion merged into a seamless flow, and she realized that she had never felt so alive. The piano was not an instrument anymore. It was an extension of herself, a voice that could speak without words. The audience began to respond subtly. A slight intake of breath here, a quiet murmur there, eyes widening in wonder. She felt the energy in the room shift, growing more intense with each measure. She understood that this connection was fragile and powerful. It required her full attention, her honesty, and her courage. One small mistake could break the spell, but she was ready. She trusted herself to let the music guide her, to trust in everything she had learned over the years. The piece moved into a slower, more contemplative section. Her fingers lingered over the keys, allowing the sound to resonate fully. Each note was deliberate, weighted with emotion. She could feel the story emerging, a tale of struggle, determination, hope, and triumph. The music was not just for the audience. It was a reflection of her own journey, a mirror of the path she had walked to arrive at this stage. She thought of the lonely nights, the quiet rooms, the moments of doubt, and realized that each had been essential to this moment. She paused briefly, allowing a single note to linger in the air. The silence that followed was almost tangible, filled with expectation. The audience seemed to hold their breath, captivated by the fragility and beauty of the moment. She felt a deep sense of connection, as if the music had created an invisible bridge between her heart and theirs. Every emotion she had poured into the piano was being reflected back at her, and it filled her with a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. Moving into the final section, the tempo increased again, demanding both technical skill and emotional control. Her hands flew over the keys with a combination of precision and passion. Each chord struck with intensity. Each passage flowed seamlessly into the next. She could feel the energy in the hall reaching its peak, the audience leaning forward, completely absorbed. She allowed herself to smile slightly, not out of arrogance, but from the pure joy of creating something that moved people so deeply. The music reached its climax. She played with everything she had, every ounce of energy and emotion. Her body swayed with the rhythm, her mind focused entirely on the story she was telling. She felt the tension and release, the highs and lows, and she knew that the audience was experiencing it with her. She could sense their anticipation, their awe, their admiration. She had transformed the nervous energy she had felt before stepping onto the stage into something powerful, something that could touch hearts and leave a lasting impression. As the final notes approached, she slowed her pace, allowing the melody to soften and fade naturally. She let the last chord resonate fully, holding it just long enough for it to fill the hall with a sense of completion. Then silence. For a heartbeat, the room was still, as if no one could believe what they had just witnessed. And then slowly applause began to rise. It started quietly as a few scattered claps, but it quickly grew louder, more confident, until the entire hall was clapping, cheering, and even standing in admiration. She looked up from the piano, taking in the scene. The audience was on their feet, faces shining with excitement and awe. Some had tears in their eyes, others smiled broadly, moved by the power and beauty of the music. She felt a rush of relief, joy, and pride all at once. The nervousness that had gripped her moments ago seemed like a distant memory. She had faced the challenge, transformed it into performance, and created something that resonated with everyone in the hall. The renowned pianist stood and clapped as well. His expression was one of genuine admiration, a nod of respect for the young musician who had faced his teasing words and turned them into something extraordinary. She could see the appreciation in his eyes, not for a show of skill, but for the courage and emotion she had brought to the music. That acknowledgement was priceless. It was not about fame or recognition. It was about the understanding between artists, the recognition of dedication, heart, and authenticity. Backstage after the performance, she felt a wave of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her hands trembled slightly from the effort. Her heart still raced from the adrenaline, and her mind replayed every moment of the performance. But along with that, there was an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She had not just played the music. She had lived it, breathed it, and shared it with an audience that now understood her story. Every practice session, every struggle, every lonely hour had led to this moment, and it was more than she could have ever imagined. She realized that this performance was only the beginning. The experience had taught her something essential, that courage and dedication could turn challenges into triumphs, and that music was a language that could convey emotion more profoundly than words ever could. She knew she would face many more challenges, more stages, more audiences, and perhaps more teasing remarks. But now she understood that she had the ability to transform every obstacle into an opportunity, to let her music speak louder than any doubt or fear. As she left the stage, the applause still echoing behind her, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had faced her fear, embraced the challenge, and emerged victorious. The music had carried her, guided her, and connected her to the audience in a way that words could never describe. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what came next, she had found her voice, her courage, and her place in the world of music. The young pianist felt a surge of energy as she continued to play. The music seemed to take on a life of its own, growing stronger and more expressive with every passing moment. She could feel the rhythm pulsing through her body, guiding her movements, telling her exactly where to place each finger, how to shape each phrase, and when to pause for effect. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a living companion, responding to her emotions and amplifying them for everyone in the hall to feel. Her eyes moved across the stage occasionally, catching glimpses of the audience. The faces that had seemed distant before now appeared fully present, focused on her, absorbed in the story she was telling through music. Some leaned forward in their seats, others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. She could feel their attention like a current moving toward her, urging her to give everything she had. Every note she played was not just heard. It was felt. She realized that in this moment, the music belonged to everyone in the hall, connecting her to each listener in a way that words never could. The tempo shifted suddenly, moving from soft, delicate passages to faster, more dramatic sequences. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision, hitting each note cleanly while maintaining the emotional depth that gave the music its power. She had practiced this section countless times, but performing it live brought new challenges. Her hands had to be quick, her mind sharp, yet her expression had to remain natural, flowing and full of feeling. She could feel her heartbeat matching the rhythm of the music, and a sense of exhilaration surged through her. The renowned pianist watched closely from the front row. He had seen countless performances, but there was something different about this one. He could see the passion in her eyes, the confidence in her posture, and the sincerity in every note she struck. His previous teasing had been meant to challenge her, but now he was witnessing something far greater. A young musician transforming pressure into artistry, fear into beauty. He could not help but admire her focus and skill, recognizing that she was not just playing music. She was creating an experience, crafting a journey for the audience to follow. The pianist moved into a section of the piece that was known for its emotional complexity. Each chord carried tension, each pause demanded attention, and every flourish needed delicate control. She took a deep breath, letting herself feel the weight of the moment. This was not just about hitting the right notes. It was about conveying a story, communicating the struggles, hopes, and triumphs that lay behind the music. Her fingers moved with a combination of technique and heart, shaping each phrase with intention and care. The audience responded without words. There was a hush in the hall, a quiet anticipation that grew with every measure. She could sense the connection deepening, the way the music seemed to flow from her hands into the hearts of the listeners. Some faces showed wonder, others showed emotion, and a few even seemed to tremble with the intensity of what they were hearing. She felt a sense of responsibility and pride. Every hour of practice, every lonely night spent perfecting her craft, every moment of self-doubt that she had overcome had led to this shared experience. The music shifted again, becoming lighter and more playful. Her fingers moved nimbly over the keys, adding flourishes and accents that made the piece sparkle. She felt joy in the sound, a pure, unfiltered happiness that she had rarely experienced in such a public setting. The audience responded with quiet delight, smiles appearing on faces as they were drawn into the playful rhythm. She realized that music could carry more than emotion. It could also create a sense of wonder, of delight, and she reveled in the ability to bring that to people who had never met her, but were experiencing her story through sound. She glanced briefly at the renowned pianist. He had a small smile now, no teasing in it, only recognition. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not from needing his approval, but from knowing that her music had reached someone who understood its depth. She returned her attention to the piano, letting herself be completely absorbed by the flow of sound. Every movement, every note, every pause was guided by instinct, trained skill, and emotion. She was fully present, entirely herself, and entirely in the music. The next passage required a combination of speed, precision, and feeling. She had practiced it countless times, but performing it live demanded more than muscle memory. She had to anticipate the rhythm, control her breathing, and remain sensitive to the subtle nuances that gave the piece its beauty. Her hands moved swiftly and gracefully, yet every note carried weight and meaning. She felt exhilarated, knowing that she was pushing herself to the limits of her ability while creating something that felt effortless to the audience. The hall seemed to hold its breath as she played the crescendo, the music rising to a peak of intensity. She could feel the energy of the room, the collective anticipation, the emotional charge that filled every corner of the space. Her fingers flew over the keys. Her body moved with the rhythm, and her heart beat in time with the music. Every note struck with power and emotion, yet she maintained control, guiding the audience through a journey of sound and feeling. The music was no longer just a performance. It was a living, breathing story. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection as the music softened again, the intensity giving way to a more delicate and introspective section. Her fingers lingered over the keys, letting each note resonate fully. She could feel the hall responding, the audience leaning in closer, their attention unwavering. She imagined each person listening with their hearts, feeling every emotion she intended to convey. In this quiet, introspective passage, she felt a sense of intimacy with the audience that she had never experienced before. The renowned pianist nodded slightly, acknowledging the skill and emotion she brought to every phrase. She did not seek his recognition, but it mattered in a small way to know that someone so accomplished understood the depth of her artistry. She returned to the music with renewed focus, letting the sound flow naturally, without forcing it, without worrying about mistakes. She knew that imperfection could sometimes add beauty, that vulnerability could sometimes deepen the connection between performer and audience. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, she felt a sense of calm and clarity. Her hands moved with confidence, her mind free from doubt, and her heart fully open to the music. She allowed herself to feel every note, every chord, every pause. The audience was fully engaged, silent except for the sound of her playing. She felt their presence as a comforting energy, supporting her, amplifying her performance, and sharing in the journey she had created. The final section approached, demanding a delicate balance of speed, precision, and emotion. She played with intensity and control, her fingers moving with fluidity and strength. Every chord struck with power, every flourish was intentional, and every phrase carried meaning. She felt a sense of triumph, not just for the technical success but for the emotional journey she had guided the audience through. She had taken them from quiet reflection to exhilaration, from gentle emotion to powerful intensity, and now toward resolution. The last notes were delicate, fading into silence like a whisper. She let her fingers linger on the final keys. Feeling the resonance fill the hall, the audience held their breath for a moment, suspended in the quiet beauty of the ending. And then slowly the first claps began. A ripple of applause spread through the hall, growing louder and louder until it became a full, thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and showing their admiration for the young pianist who had transformed the hall with her music. She took a deep breath, feeling the mixture of relief, joy, and pride that surged through her. She had done more than perform. She had connected, inspired, and moved the audience. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier was gone, replaced by a profound sense of fulfillment. She had faced challenges, embraced pressure, and turned it into something extraordinary. The music had carried her, guided her, and allowed her to share a piece of herself with the world. The renowned pianist stood as well, applauding with genuine admiration. She could see the respect in his eyes, the acknowledgement of the courage, skill, and emotion she had brought to the stage. It was not about proving herself to him, but the recognition felt meaningful. He had challenged her, teased her, and now he witnessed the power of her artistry. She understood then that challenges, even those meant in jest, could become opportunities to rise higher than she had imagined. Backstage, after the applause had settled, she felt her body trembling slightly from the intensity of the performance. Her hands were sore, her heart still racing, but her spirit was soaring. She had poured herself into the music completely, and it had been received with wonder and appreciation. She knew that this performance would stay with her forever. A moment that marked her growth, her courage, and her ability to transform pressure into brilliance. As she walked off the stage, the applause still echoing in her ears, she felt a quiet sense of peace. She had not just played the piano, she had lived through it, felt it, and shared it in its purest form. Every note, every chord, every pause had carried meaning, and the audience had responded with openness and emotion. She realized that this was what music was truly about: connection, expressi. As she moved into the final part of her performance, a wave of intensity washed over her. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the section that demanded the highest skill, the deepest emotion, and the most focus. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a heartbeat, feeling the smooth surface beneath them, reminding herself of every hour of practice, every challenge she had overcome, and every moment that had led her to this stage. She could hear the faint hum of anticipation in the hall, a collective energy that pressed on her shoulders yet fueled her determination. The first notes of the final section rang out, strong and deliberate. She played with precision, each chord resonating with emotion, each phrase carrying the story she wanted to tell. Her hands moved quickly yet gracefully, navigating the complexities of the piece with confidence. Every movement was intentional, every note chosen to communicate not just sound but feeling. She was no longer just performing. She was telling a story of struggle, determination, and triumph. A story that had begun in quiet rooms, practiced alone, and now unfolded in front of hundreds of eyes and ears. The audience sat captivated, leaning in, fully absorbed by the music. She could sense their emotions, the way they shifted with each change in tempo, each rise and fall of melody. Some were holding their breath, caught in the suspense of rapid passages. Others were visibly moved, their eyes reflecting the intensity of the music. She felt a deep connection to them, a silent conversation through sound, and it made her heart swell. She realized that this connection was what she had been striving for all along. Not fame, not recognition, but the ability to touch people, to make them feel something beyond words. Her mind focused entirely on the music, shutting out distractions, doubts, and the enormity of the hall. She felt every note, every chord, every rhythm as an extension of herself. The piano was no longer a separate instrument. It was part of her body, part of her soul. Each movement of her fingers, each shift of her wrists, was a dialogue between her heart and the audience. The complexity of the piece demanded everything from her: technical skill, mental focus, and emotional depth, and she delivered it seamlessly. The renowned pianist in the front row watched intently. His teasing smile had vanished entirely, replaced by a look of admiration and concentration. He had challenged her before, and now he was witnessing her rise to that challenge with brilliance. She felt his gaze not as pressure but as recognition. It was a quiet acknowledgement that her talent, dedication, and courage had brought her to this level. His presence reminded her of the journey she had taken, the hurdles she had overcome, and the persistence that had guided her hands to this moment. The music began to build toward its climax. Rapid passages, intricate runs, and powerful chords demanded every ounce of her attention and energy. Her fingers flew across the keys, controlled yet expressive, precise yet passionate. She felt herself becoming one with the piano, her movements guided by instinct, training, and the emotions flowing through her. Every note carried intention, every phrase contributed to the narrative she was unfolding, and she could feel the audience riding the wave of her performance. She reached a particularly challenging section, where speed, accuracy, and emotion collided. It was a part that could make or break the performance, where mistakes could be glaring but perfection would leave the audience breathless. Her hands moved with unwavering confidence, each chord struck cleanly, each passage flowing naturally. She felt exhilaration coursing through her veins, the kind of thrill that only comes when one pushes beyond limits and achieves something extraordinary. The pressure was immense, but it was matched by a sense of purpose and joy that kept her grounded. The hall seemed to respond to her playing, the energy in the room rising with every note. She could feel it like a current flowing through her, guiding her, supporting her. The audience's silence was filled with intensity, their attention fully captured, their emotions aligned with hers. She noticed subtle reactions, the quick intake of breath, the tightening of hands on laps, the soft nods of heads. Each reaction reinforced the impact of her music, and it encouraged her to go further, to pour even more of herself into the performance. She allowed herself a moment to feel the weight of her journey. She thought of the countless hours spent practicing alone, the doubts, the setbacks, the moments of near despair. She thought of the small victories, the breakthroughs, the moments of pure joy when a phrase finally came together perfectly. Every experience had led her here, to this hall, to this moment where her music could touch so many people at once. She felt gratitude for the journey, and that gratitude flowed through her fingers, coloring every note with authenticity and emotion. The crescendo approached, and she embraced it fully. The music surged, powerful and unstoppable, filling the hall with sound that was both commanding and beautiful. Her fingers danced across the keys with speed and control, her wrists guiding every nuance, her body moving naturally with the rhythm. She could feel the audience responding, their energy feeding into hers, creating a shared experience that was electric and unforgettable. It was as if the music had become a living entity, connecting every person in the room through sound and feeling. The renowned pianist's expression showed quiet awe. He had performed in grand halls and witnessed countless musicians, but there was something about this performance that was different. It was not just technical mastery or flawless execution. It was soul, heart, and courage intertwined. She had transformed a challenge, a teasing remark, into something breathtaking, something that transcended skill and became pure artistry. His eyes reflected the recognition of her talent and the understanding of the journey that had brought her here. As the music reached its peak, she felt a combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. Every muscle in her body was engaged, every thought focused on the sound she was creating. She felt the tension in the hall, the anticipation, the collective breath of the audience waiting for what would come next. She allowed herself to trust in her instincts, to let the piano guide her, to let the emotion flow without restraint. The final notes would demand precision, control, and feeling, and she was ready. The last section was both delicate and intense, requiring careful balance. She slowed her pace, allowing the notes to resonate fully, creating a sense of anticipation and release. Her fingers lingered on the keys, shaping every chord with intention. She felt the story reach its resolution, the tension easing into calm, the narrative completing itself through sound. She imagined the audience experiencing every emotion she intended, from suspense to relief, from wonder to awe. She could sense their hearts moving with hers, and it filled her with a profound sense of connection. Finally, she struck the last chord. It rang out, full and pure, lingering in the hall like a heartbeat. She allowed it to resonate fully, feeling its vibration through her body, and then she lifted her hands slowly. Silence filled the room for a moment, as if time had stopped, and then the first applause began. It was soft at first, a ripple of sound that quickly grew louder, stronger, until the entire hall erupted in cheering, clapping, and standing ovation. The sound was overwhelming yet joyous, and she felt a mixture of relief, pride, and sheer happiness. The audience's reaction was more than she had imagined. People were smiling, some had tears in their eyes, others were whispering to each other in awe. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not just performed but had created a shared emotional experience. The nervousness, the pressure, and even the teasing remark from earlier had all transformed into something powerful and beautiful. She had turned challenge into triumph, fear into courage, and doubt into artistry. The renowned pianist stood as well, applauding with genuine admiration. She caught his eyes and saw acknowledgement, respect, and understanding. It was a quiet but profound moment. She realized that recognition from someone she had respected and who had once teased her was not the goal. It was the affirmation of her own growth and courage. She had faced the ultimate challenge and had emerged not just successful, but transformed. Backstage, after the applause had settled, she felt the full weight of the performance. Her hands were sore, her heart still raced, and her mind replayed every moment of the music. But beneath it all was a deep, unshakable sense of achievement. She had poured her soul into the piano and shared it with the world, and they had responded with love, admiration, and awe. She realized that this was what music was truly about, not just notes, but connection, emotion, and shared humanity. She thought of the journey that had brought her here. Every hour of practice, every setback, every moment of doubt had led to this moment. The teasing words that could have shaken her had become a spark, igniting determination and focus. The performance had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of character, resilience, and heart. She had discovered not only her talent, but also her courage and ability to connect through music. As she stepped off the stage, the applause still echoing behind her, she felt a sense of calm and purpose. She had faced the challenge, embraced the pressure, and created something extraordinary. She knew that more challenges would come, more performances, and perhaps more teasing or doubt, but now she understood that she could face them all. Her music, The applause still rang in her ears as she walked backstage, her hands tingling from the intensity of her performance. Her heart was still pounding, but it was no longer the nervous thrum of anticipation. It was the deep, satisfying pulse of triumph. She had done it. She had transformed a simple piano piece into a story that touched every person in the hall, and she felt an incredible mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She leaned against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes and letting the sounds of cheering and clapping wash over her. She could still feel the vibrations of the piano in her fingers, a lingering reminder of the hours she had spent preparing, the countless mistakes she had corrected, and the moments of doubt she had overcome. All of it had led to this single, perfect experience. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to simply feel. The satisfaction of accomplishment, the glow of courage rewarded, and the warmth of human connection through music. Soon, the renowned pianist approached her backstage. His steps were quiet but deliberate, and his expression was calm, almost reverent. He extended his hand with a small smile, a smile that carried genuine respect. She felt a mixture of nervousness and pride as she shook his hand. He had been the one to challenge her, to tease her playfully earlier, but now that look in his eyes said something entirely different. It said acknowledgement, admiration, and perhaps even inspiration. "You played beautifully," he said quietly, his tone measured yet sincere. "You took the music and made it yours. That takes more than skill, it takes courage." She felt a rush of warmth at his words. For a moment she struggled to find the right reply. It was not simply praise. It was understanding, a recognition of the effort, emotion, and persistence that had brought her here. She realized that this was the difference between recognition given lightly and recognition truly earned. She nodded, unable to speak immediately, her voice caught somewhere between humility and joy. After a moment she managed to reply, her words soft but steady. "Thank you, I wasn't sure if I could do it, but I just let the music guide me." He smiled again, this time more genuinely, and nodded. "And that's exactly why it worked. Talent alone is never enough. You have heart, determination, and a willingness to take risks. That is what makes music memorable." The conversation, though brief, lingered in her mind long after he walked away. She realized that the experience had been more than just a performance. It had been a test of character, a moment where fear, pressure, and challenge could have overwhelmed her, but instead she had turned them into fuel. She had learned that vulnerability could be powerful, that courage could transform nervous energy into art, and that authenticity was always more compelling than perfection. Back in the quiet of the dressing room, she sat down and let herself reflect on the evening. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the lonely hours of practice in a small, dimly lit room, to the nervous excitement backstage, every step had been a preparation for this moment. Every setback, every challenge, every small triumph had shaped her into a musician capable of conveying something larger than sound alone. She understood now that the journey itself was as important as the performance. Her mind wandered to the audience. Faces she had not known moments ago now seemed vividly alive in her memory. She remembered the way some leaned forward, completely absorbed, the way others closed their eyes, lost in the music, the expressions of awe, wonder, and even tears. She felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had given them not just music, but an experience, a story, a shared emotional journey. The thought that her art could touch people so profoundly filled her with a quiet, enduring joy. A small smile crossed her face as she realized something important. This performance, as powerful and transformative as it had been, was only the beginning. There would be other stages, other audiences, other challenges. There would be moments of doubt, moments of fear, and perhaps even moments of teasing from someone meant to test her resolve. But she now carried within her the proof that she could rise above those challenges, that she could transform pressure into beauty, and that she could reach people's hearts with honesty and courage. As she prepared to leave the dressing room, she thought about the way music had connected everyone in the hall that evening. It was a reminder that art was more than performance. It was bridge, connection, and communication. She realized that the most important thing was not recognition or applause, but the ability to convey truth, to share emotion, and to create moments that lingered long after the final note faded. The thought was both humbling and inspiring. She stepped out into the hall once more, now quiet and nearly empty, the echoes of applause fading into memory. She walked slowly down the aisles, touching the backs of seats, imagining the people who had been there, who had listened, who had felt her music in ways that words could never capture. She felt a sense of closeness with them, a bond created not by conversation but by shared experience. It was a reminder of why she played, why she dedicated herself to the piano, and why she had endured every challenge along the way. In the lobby, a few audience members approached, shyly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. They thanked her, praised her, and expressed how moved they had been. Some spoke of memories the music had awakened, emotions long buried, or hopes they felt reignited. Each story was different, yet each pointed to the same truth. Music, when played with heart and honesty, could reach people in ways that transcended ordinary life. She listened with quiet attention, grateful for the connection, humbled by their openness, and filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Even later, long after the hall had emptied, she reflected on the evening as she walked home. The city lights sparkled, cars moved quietly along streets, and life continued as it always did. Yet she felt changed, transformed by the experience. The nervousness, the challenge, the teasing remark, it all had meaning now. It had pushed her, shaped her, and allowed her to discover the full extent of her abilities. She realized that every obstacle, every doubt, and every challenge could become a source of strength if approached with courage and heart. She thought again of the renowned pianist, of his initial teasing, and the way it had ignited something inside her. She understood now that challenges often come disguised, sometimes as jokes, sometimes as doubt from others, but they were opportunities to rise, to prove not to anyone else but to herself, that she was capable of more than she imagined. That realization stayed with her, a quiet but powerful lesson she would carry forever. The experience had also given her a new perspective on the role of fear and expectation. She had learned that fear was not an enemy but a guide. It signaled that something mattered, that effort and courage were required, and that growth awaited on the other side. By embracing fear rather than avoiding it, she had found her voice, her strength, and the full expression of her art. That understanding felt liberating, giving her confidence for every performance to come. Even as exhaustion settled into her muscles, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She had faced her moment of challenge head-on, embraced it fully, and emerged victorious. But more than victory, she had discovered the joy of sharing, the magic of connection, and the power of authenticity. The applause, the admiration, the recognition, they were affirming, But the deeper reward was the knowledge that she had given her very best and had moved hearts in the process. That night, as she finally rested, she allowed herself to dream. Not dreams of fame or accolades, but dreams of music itself. The next composition, the next stage, the next story she could tell through sound. She knew that there would be struggles, mistakes, and moments of doubt again, but she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and heart to face them. She had learned that the journey mattered as much as the destination, that vulnerability could become power, and that courage, when combined with dedication, could transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. In the quiet hours, she reflected on what she had learned about herself. She realized that her growth had not been measured solely by technical skill or flawless performance, but by her ability to embrace fear, take risks, and connect with others. She had discovered a depth of courage she had not known existed, and an ability to express herself through music that transcended notes and chords. She felt grateful for the challenges, for the teaching moments, and even for the playful teasing that had sparked her determination. By morning, she awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The memory of the performance, the audience's faces, and the applause lingered with her, a reminder of what was possible when one embraced fear and followed heart and instinct. She knew that the journey ahead would be filled with new challenges and opportunities, but she also knew that she had proven to herself that she was capable of rising to any occasion, of turning pressure into art, and of reaching hearts through honesty and courage. She smiled, feeling a quiet confidence settle into her. The hall, the piano, the audience, and even the renowned pianist's teasing, all of it had contributed to her growth, her courage, and her artistry. She understood now that every challenge was an opportunity, every moment of doubt a chance to discover strength, and every performance a chance to connect with others in ways that transcended words. She was ready for whatever came next, carrying "We."